Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for joining us, and a big thank you to Future Growth Asset Management for making this conversation possible. My name is Rebecca Davis. I'm a journalist for the Daily Maverick, and I'm here today in conversation with Mosilo Mothepu, who's the former CEO of Trillian Financial Advisory, who ended up blowing the whistle on Trillian and Nenegate. William Bourdon, who's the founder of the Platform for the Protection of African Whistleblowers, describes her as the South African Edward Snowden, and she has written the book Uncaptured, the true account of the Nenegate Trillian whistleblowers. I should say it's available to buy from the Daily Maverick shop with free delivery anywhere in South Africa. And if you are a Maverick insider, which means a member of our Daily Maverick membership program, you get a 10% discount when using your coupon code at checkout. Mosilo, we're here today to discuss basically how an ordinary woman working in financial services in South Africa goes to the front page of the Sunday Times, finds herself in front of Parliament, testifying to the FBI, an extraordinary journey. So let me start perhaps by asking you, why did you write this book? And I ask that also because so much of your story seems traumatic that I can't imagine it was a particularly pleasant journey always reviewing all that.
Good afternoon, Rebecca, and good afternoon to all the beloved Daily Mavericks insiders. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon, and thank you so much for the opportunity to tell my story for the second time on your platform. It was last year, actually, in Cape Town, if you remember, at the gathering, that I decided to finally write my book. As you've said, the journey has been long, extraordinary, unbelievable, devastating. And last year, it happened in January, that I was looking at my life and how just 1 year of me being at Regiments and Trillian has affected me in such a profound way. The effects were devastating. But then I asked God, I'm a Christian, or whoever your faith is, what was the purpose of that journey? What lessons were they? And what now? And I was having a late brunch on one Sunday, and then I decided to just sit alone. And it came to me that I want to write my book. And why now? Because I was ready now to tell a story of bravery, met by betrayal, devastation, but one of hope, and one to inspire and embolden ordinary South Africans to do something ordinary. And such a simple thing is to tell the truth. And I wanted to share my journey. Of course, my patriotism was met with betrayal by my own government, by corporate SA. And it was very, very devastating for me. But I had pockets of hold on, Adrina. I had pockets of brilliance in terms of people coming through in a big way. So I have even a chapter called Angels and Demons, which essentially tells how ordinary South Africans read my stories and were moved to compassion and effectively changed my life.
Right. Mosilo, you know you're currently invisible to us.
I know, for a very good reason. So
okay, I'm going to trust you to turn yourself back on when you get. Okay.
I will. Perfect. Yes.
Mosilo, let's talk a bit about Mosilo pre-2007, which is sort of when your interaction with regiments and some of the characters in this book begins. You say in the book, for instance, that before you met your life partner, who is a diplomat, you were quite uninterested in politics. Is that right?
That's perfectly right. I think I was a typical, I would say, commerce student. I didn't even partake in the SRC elections in university. I read the Financial Mail. I read the Business Day. I always knew who the governor was of the Reserve Bank and the Minister of Finance. But I was not political in any way. I did vote, though. But I didn't know who the ministers were. I didn't know when the ANC conferences had the difference between an elective conference and a policy conference, all of that. It was when I met Mavimbela, who was the at the time when we met, he was the DG in the presidency.
Right.
And then he went to Zimbabwe for 5 years to serve as an ambassador. So that is when I think I got my political introduction. But it was, I think, working with regiments in 2007.
Yeah.
Then I realized how municipalities work. So at least the mayors and the councillors and the city managers. But not political, not so much. I mean, I would say a fairly wonderful, privileged life. I have a postgraduate from BITS in corporate finance and investment. My stress was, where am I going on holiday? The bonus wasn't enough. The increase wasn't enough.
Right.
That's it. And of course, being a Black woman, having worked for corporate SA, it's quite interesting that we're having this debate now as the former APSA CEO has stepped aside. And I could really, really relate to him, because corporate hasn't really transformed to the point where you feel like you are qualified, you can add value. And I always felt that I'm a Black woman, and that's all that I'll ever be. So I had to fight for meaningful work and transactions. And I think that is what attracted me to regiments, regiments 1.0 and regiments 2.0, because I left after 3 years, and then I went to Transaction Capital and KPMG, same experience. So when regiments called me again in 2015, and now they were saying we have Eskom and working with McKinsey and Transnet, I definitely didn't have a second thought to return to them. I always call them my home, even right now. I know it's a bit controversial, but I know now what they were, but at that time, of course, we were not very wise. Everything was I think now we can see that things happened in Melrose Arch and the Michelangelo and all sorts of interesting places in Joburg. Yes.
Yeah, I was struck by the fact that it seemed to me that you were much more vulnerable to the likes of Eric Wood and regiments, and eventually Trillian, because you'd had these quite negative experiences in South African corporates, because you had found it in general to be quite a racist, hostile environment. And here comes a white man, sure, but he's a white man who, really for the first time seems to show this unbelievable level of trust in you. He wants to make you the CEO, etc. And in a way, then, there's a sense that he was preying on that kind of racial dimension that's happening within the corporate. Can you tell us a little bit about Eric Wood? He's quite a fascinating character in this book and, in life.
Eric Wood, he was raised in the West Rand, so he comes from very humble beginnings. He had matric, and he went to serve as articles at a stockbroking firm, and he didn't have a degree, he didn't have a qualification post matric, so he worked his way up until he got to Investec, and he started off the derivatives desk, and he made millions in bonuses, I think in the 80s and 90s. So he's very intelligent and knows the markets very well. And he left Investec, and I think the three of them, Lisa and Niven, decided to start regiments in 2007. He's very wealthy. I mean, lives in Sandhurst. He loves his helicopters, his rhinos, his Aston Martins. It's just an unreal life. I remember one day when we were at AXA, when we were preparing the funding for the airports in preparation of the 2010, and Priscilla Mabelane, the FD of AXA, the airports companies, she proposed a meeting, and he says, no, I can't make it. I'm receiving a baby rhino. and then we left, and then she walked us out, and she said, oh, Eric, that's a nice car. And he drove his Aston Martin. So the next time we met, she said, I asked my husband about your car, and he said it was an Aston Martin, and it's this much. And when we invoiced, she slashed our bill, I think, by half. And so from then on, I had to drive my A3 everywhere we go with Eric because of these difficulties. But I have to say that out of the three directors and shareholders at regiments, I worked closely with Eric. He's the one who had the most faith in me. So I think, the AXA deal, eventually I ran it alone without him, and he would just get reports. And several other transactions that I did when I was at City of Joburg. So for him, I think it helped that I was white. I was not white and I was not male, black female, but highly great work ethic. And he would fight for me to get the above bonus, above average increase, because he knew that I put in the effort.
Absolutely. So 2015, you're asked by Eric Wood to rejoin regiments, and something has changed. You notice, to your surprise, that the firm has expanded massively because they now have all these major state-owned entities as clients, just a whole roster of them. And you want to know how they did it, and what did they tell you?
Yes, when I joined regiments in 2007, I was the 6th employee. We were in Melrose Arch, yes. And if anybody remembers where the Orient restaurant was, upstairs. So it was just just after the subprime market. So they had these penthouses that they were not selling. So they had converted them into offices. So I remember Lita's office was a bedroom. Our offices were the lounge, and we were there like sardines, and 2 of the other offices were boardrooms. And then when I left in 2010, December, there were 50 people, and we had moved to a hired office complex in Houghton. But when I returned in 2015, there was 250 people, can you believe, in such a space of 5 years. And when I left regiments, they were struggling to get contracts, or even in meetings with the Transnets, the Escoms, the SAAs. But when I came back, I saw that they had essentially the blue chip state-owned companies, Eskom, Transnet, Denel, SA Express, SAA, under the DPE umbrella. But there was Malesiku Gaba, but then it was Lynn Brown when I was there. And they had a different model. They said they have business development partners in the name of Salim Issa and Kuben Mudli. And these gentlemen have contacts with the presidency, the ministers, the boards, and the executives, and they open doors, they open the taps, they milk the cows. And and their arrangement was, for every successful transaction, they would get a portion of the invoice. Now, having come from KPMG, even though that's not a great idea, it is a business practice to have. I think in the UK, you are a lobbyist, and then you get a portion of whatever you did. So it didn't raise any alarm bells. And I think at that time, the only thing Salim was not really linked to the Guptas. We only knew that the Guptas had landed at Watersproof. So I just happily accepted the offer to rejoin them, and I was taken to meet the boards and the executive of all the state-owned companies, the Machela Kokos and the Brian Molefes and the Mark Perminskis and the Gary Peters and the Siyabona Gama. And I
think those are the characters you refer to as the who's who of state capture.
That's correct.
So, McKinsey and regiments, it's announced, are working together to assist Eskom with management consulting services. Again, not something that would necessarily raise eyebrows at the time, but you write in your book, and I think it's a very important point, that the unnecessary use of management consultants is actually one of the hallmarks of state capture. Could you say a bit about that?
Yes, and right now, when I see the Zondo Commission and I see how, for example, Eskom, you had the CFO. I think her name was Sidiso Molefe. She had been approached by Salim Issa and Eric to work with regiments, and she refused, and she was suspended. And because of her now being suspended and then eventually parting ways in a mutual termination agreement, then it paved a way for regiments and myself to come in. And essentially there was a replacement in Anut Singh, but they could have done the funding plan they could have raised their own money because they have the Treasury, Caroline Henry. She had been there for decades. Eskom once used to get all the Treasury awards, and there was a time where Eskom had a higher credit rating than the sovereign. It was the darling of the bond market, and politics ruined it. And when you look at next door, Transnet, the club loan, 12 billion rand, Matang, who was the treasurer at Transnet, said the club it was expensive. The China development loan was too expensive. She refused to sign. She resigns. Enter regiments and enter Mosilo and Eric. And for me, it was heartbreaking. I said something like, but it's not in my book. But I said my whole career has been a crime scene. These guys were bullying ethical executives and under the scene, of course. And it paved the way for regiments, and regiments empowered me to work on these transactions. But then I see that the ethical experts were essentially pushed away to enter regiments and charge at exorbitant fees. I mean, you look at the China development loan, a regiment was paid 190 million rand. The club loan, Trillian was paid 94 million rand for doing absolutely nothing. Regiments did that work. Still not sure why Ms. Shamila is not going after such an easy thing. And then you look at Eskom, the 1.6 billion rand paid to Mackenzie and Trillian without having a valid contract and without much value. Because if there was value today, we would not have load shedding.
Right.
And Mackenzie's paid back the money. And Trillian, of course, has tried to go to the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein. They lost that. And they have Eskom has subsequently applied for the liquidation of Trillian, but really Trillian is nothing, and the money is sitting in Dubai.
Yep,
and in Eric Wood's trusts.
Yeah. To our listeners, just a reminder that you are welcome to drop your comments and questions into the chat box as we go along. I will be taking them for Mosilo in a little while when we get to that, just trying to deal with some of the chronological aspects of the story first, and also to say that there's a great article by Future Growth on whistleblowers and the measures that need to be taken to protect them, which is also in the chat box. So Eric Wood persuades you to move with him to Trillian on the 1st of March, 2016. And very shortly thereafter, you find out President Zuma is going to fire the finance minister. Tell us about that.
My goodness. I always say that what's that saying? Truth is stranger than fiction. Yes, my life has been so very strange. Me and Eric, we used to get on like a house on fire. In my book, I call that stage my grooming stage. He had overpaid me. He had given me a 500,000 rand sign-on bonus, and I was the highest paid non-executive person there.
Just tell the audience, if you don't mind, what your salary was, because it really is quite something.
No, it's in the book. Yes, I mean, I went from KPMG, which was 1.3 million. He took it up to 1.75 million, and a sign-on bonus of 500,000 in the space of in less than a year. So yeah, it was ridiculous. Well, it was a blessing, I thought. And we used to wake up quite early, so he would arrive, I'm not sure what time, but I was usually at the office at around 7:30, and I'd have a coffee with him in his office. I was in the open plan section. So he used to tell me about, his partners, and I could see that they're starting to have an acrimonious relationship. He'd tell me about his wife's shopping habits, or he'd tell me how proud he is that his daughter Zara has passed the board and she's going to be a chartered accountant, those kind of things. And then, of course, I'll tell him about Vusi and whatever issues I had. And one day he just tells me in October 2015 that the president is going to fire Nene. And he's going to replace him with a more pliable minister. And I really was sort of bored with this revelation, because for 9 years we had daily midnight cabinet reshuffles.
Right.
And I didn't understand the significance of what he was telling me. So I didn't even ask, why are you telling me? Who is he going to replace him with?
Right.
Who told you? So I didn't pay much attention. I just went on to my day. And then somewhere between then and the 9th of December, Teboho Leballo told me that Mohammed Bobat, who was a principal at regiments, who also reported to Eric, was going to be the new finance minister's special advisor, which I thought was weird. And then on that day, Nenegate, I get a call from my life partner. I'm sleeping by midnight. And he tells me, what have you guys done? I'm like, what are you talking about? The president has fired Nhlanhla. And I said, I knew. And he said, no, but how do you know? And I said, well, he was the DG of NIA, the National Intelligence Agency, and he's always told me never to speak sensitive political things on the phone. So he had to wait 6 weeks for him to come back to Joburg, and then we had dinner at Signature, and then I told him what I knew all along. But I think for me, what the red flags were that morning when Eric told me the role of Mohammed Bobat will be a mole for regiments or Trillian. He will have inside information with regards to the tenders. He sent me through a document with about 12 transactions and the role and the fees that regiment/Trillian were going to earn, because of the minister is now going to approve all these deals, like the nuclear deal and Dudu Mweni's SAA transactions and yes, all that. And so Eric and Salim decided now to establish Trillian. So I moved from regiments to Trillian on the 1st of March through a Section 197 in terms of the Labour Act. So it's like when there's an acquisition of one company to another, you take the employees with you, and the assets and the liabilities. So what was supposed to happen was that all the contracts that the advisory had was supposed to be ceded to Trillian, and so that we would continue to work. So the red flags started when I saw that the sessions had not happened. And then I realized that there was an acrimonious relationship between the three directors. And Teboho Leballo told me that they had terminated the negotiations. And I think every single proposal that Trillian had submitted to Transnet was a proposal with no work done. I think something like 300 million rand was invoiced. Eskom, I knew that there was no contracts, but and Mr. Singh and Mr. Koko knew this. But by the 31st of March, that McKinsey has decided not to partner with Trillian because they deemed our shareholder, Mr. Salim Issa, a politically exposed person. But it astounds me that how can you pay 1.6 billion rand and in breach of the PFMA and the Companies Act and any other legislation, and you risk your reputation as a chartered accountant, as an engineer. I have yet to understand what these people were promised to essentially loot unabatedly, unashamedly, and an entire economy. That's for me will be the breaking story. If somebody can crack that, we need like a greasy.
Yes, we need an greasy, someone to sing like a canary.
Yeah. And it's quite fascinating, isn't it? That like the VBS, you have the CFO who has decided to turn state witness, and then you have the Busasa matter where the Agrizi has decided to sing like a canary. But these guys, they have till today denied.
Yeah.
And I don't understand if the money they got was so. It was so big, or the threats they got was just too frightening for them to say, you know what, I've grown a conscience. Till today, Machela Koko, he wanted to start a Twitter war with me yesterday, saying that he didn't meet me, he refused to take my meetings, and I'm sending emails. It was a pleasure meeting you yesterday. Thank you so much for introducing you to your colleagues. As per your request, here's a and he's like, no, I never. Wow. And then and I said, the truth shall set you free, and that's all I gave him. And I said, oh, by the way, thank you for publicizing my book. At the end of the day, yeah, if he wanted to stay at Eskom, I was his first witness when they instituted a disciplinary against him. So he could have stayed and fought the good fight. I don't understand why I'm being denied like Jesus, and he's Peter. I met him. He contributed to the contract and its negotiation. I've got emails to prove that, and he says he didn't respond to the emails. Yes, he didn't respond to the emails. I would call him, and then we'd meet, he'll make changes, and then I'll give him the amendment. And I would say, as per your request, here are the amendments. And I feel a little bit like I'm a dirty secret that everybody's denying that they met me.
Mosilo, I was struck while reading your book. State capture is by now kind of a well-worn subject for us all, but there's still so many shocking elements, I felt, in this story. For instance, the fact that Eric Wood appointed a PR company to write Des Van Rooyen's first speech as finance minister. I mean, that blew my mind. The amount of money that SEOs were squandering, the fact that you were told to build Transnet over 11 million rand for an unsolicited proposal, no actual work.
Yes, every single Trillian, I think they probably build state-owned companies, I would say anything between 3 and 5 billion rand without a contract and without work being done. Just looting in the most industrial scale you can ever imagine.
So as I understand it, your position is, you are registered as an executive director of this company. You have fiduciary responsibilities, legal responsibilities, but increasingly you feel like you don't know what is going on. And that must have been unbelievably stressful.
I mean, you look at the first invoice that Trillian sent. It was in February, and it was sent by Clive Angel because I refused to send Transnet, an 11.4 million rand invoice for an unsolicited bid. And then once I got to Trillian in March, I saw that I was copied on this invoice. And once the McKinsey partners informed us about them not, partnering with Trillian, and I told Eric and Anuj, what's going to happen. And Eric just said, no, he'll just find a way to appoint us through some tender that was running at the time. But that tender I don't think Trillian was ever appointed on their panel of service providers. But while Anuj was lying to Lynn Brown and to South Africa after my statement was leaked to the Sunday Times, where I alleged that Eskom had paid Trillian without a contract. And for him to lie and say, no, indeed, there was no contract, but we haven't paid them a single cent. It was when I met Butland in May 2017 that I knew,
Butlander, right?
Yes, SC, yes, Advocate Butlander, who after the revelations of the Sunday Times expose, decided to appoint Jeff Butlander. But I'm always wondering about Tokyo's role in corporate governance. We're talking about fiduciary duties. Amabungani and the Sunday Times and several other publications had already started sniffing around Trillian. And surely before my statement was on the cover of the Sunday Times, he should have asked the difficult questions. Can I see the contracts? What process was followed? Why does he need an expose like the Sunday Times? But I am grateful that he did eventually appoint Advocate Butlander, and I was vindicated. And I saw that at the time when Mr. Singh was saying Eskom has not paid Trillian a cent. No, he was absolutely right. Eskom had paid Trillian 366 million. And by the time the penny was spent, it was just under 700 million rand. Which I had to spend now my time with the new executive writing affidavits and doing confirmatory affidavits to get the money back.
Right. At what point did you start to understand what state capture was? Because you do say that there was a particular moment where it starts crystallizing for you.
It was when I saw that web of, it was like a diagram of web with Stan Shane and Mark Pominski, and it had Des Van Rooyen and Lynn Brown and Malusi Kigaba. I think it was on the Mail and Guardian, and it was in partnership with Amabungani. I think it was March. So I'd literally been at Trillian for 5 minutes. And then I realized I could fill in the gaps. And this line isn't supposed to go here. It's actually supposed to be here. And I remember going to Mark Pominski because we used to share an office. Mark, look, you're in the article. So I went back to my house and spoke with my partner, and I realized I've essentially signed up for something that I was not aware of, and it was time for me to leave. I eventually left. My relationship with Eric broke down. I mean, I kept saying corporate governance. Let's apply the law to the letter, and bit by bit, the relationship became acrimonious. He started to sideline me, and for the first time in my life. So now, I was earning 2.3 million, and I got an 800,000 rand salary, and I left without a cent, without another job. Because I could not stand it anymore, and I could not be complicit.
Sorry, Mosilo. There's a concept in your book that really made me laugh, even though it's obviously very serious, and that was the dilemma of a wreath or tampons. Do you want to explain that to the audience?
Oh my God, shame. Okay, so I left, and I read the Companies Act, and I had to go see a lawyer, and the lawyer says I have to see either the police, and I knew they were corrupt, or parliamentarian. Which parliamentarian? You can see parliament oversight, not nil, or the public protector. So I left to go to Egypt. That's where now Vusi was stationed. He was now the ambassador of Cairo. And he took me to Sharm el-Sheikh, and Sharm el-Sheikh is the most amazing place for any Christian or Muslim or Jewish, where the wilderness. We walked down the wilderness where the children of Israel were enslaved, and they were freed by Moses and Aaron, and Mount Sinai, and the plaque where the 10 Commandments were given, and the Red Sea. So I had such a moment of clarity, and I felt emboldened by my faith. And I saw that as I was having sundowners, the Red Sea, and I decided just to switch on my Wi-Fi and check what's happening in South Africa. And I saw that the hawks were, the hawks, or I call them the vultures, were circling around Pravin Gordhan. Because I knew in, Trina, I knew in March already, Debo Leballo had told me that 3 months after Pravin Gordhan was finance minister, the president wanted to fire him. So I knew these fraud charges were essentially malicious, fabricated, just to make sure that, I can't have a finance minister under investigation for fraud. He must step aside. And I saw that Tuli Madonsela only had half of her budget that she had asked from National Treasury. And for the first time, I actually looked at her terms of reference. And I saw that I could help her in probably 90% of that. So my mom has always been my moral compass. So I thought, okay, Mosilo, first of all, South Africa's burning. And I said, no, but somebody else will tell Tuli, somebody else will tell Pravin. And I looked at the terms of reference again, and I said, only a Trillian insider can give her this information. So I said to God, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for a good woman to do absolutely nothing. And I said, am I a good woman? And I said, I have to be. South Africa's burning, and it was my moment of conversion, my Damascus moment.
Right.
And I remember thinking, if I go and they kill me, my mother will have to lay a wreath on my coffin. But if I don't go, and then not reporting on corruption and is a crime in itself. So she will have to visit me in prison and get me my contraband, which is my Chardonnay and tampons. So I had to ask, what is more dignified for my mom, the prison visit or the laying of wreath on my coffin? And it was the laying of wreath on my coffin. And 3 days later, I was back in South Africa meeting Trillian.
It's a very wonderful and succinct way to sum up that dilemma. Women all over South Africa, think about it, a wreath or tampons whenever you're unsure of what to do. You meet with Trillian, and thereafter you write that you're seriously worried that you're going to be assassinated. Like, this is a genuine concern for you. Was there any point during this whole journey where you felt like your life was in danger?
I think it was when I had sight of Eric's criminal affidavit against me. And he said I left Niven's house at midnight. And I was told by a journalist that state security monitors my movements and my phone. So I have never actually gotten death threats, but I had to be very careful with regards to my movements, not having my phone on, taking the locations off, Ubering, don't take the same word twice. But Trillian's strategy was lawfare, if you see. Yes. I had 9 criminal charges against me: extortion, corruption, conspiracy, fraud, everything. You know, I always say everything but running a brothel. And they wanted that 500,000 sign-on bonus back because I had to be there for 2 years. Mm-hmm. And then also contravening my confidentiality code, clause in my contract. So my bill had been now 1.3 million rand. And for them, it was lawful for them. I remember Jessica Behosenholt told me that when they were in the same elevator with Steinscop lawyers, they told the HR of Trillian, don't worry, we're going to bleed her dry. And they almost succeeded in bleeding me dry. Jessica wrote a great article, and you saw that you mentioned William Bardon of PLAF, the protection of African whistleblowers. So they had just started, they used to support Julian Assange. They still support Edwin Snowden. So they just opened a African office, and they saw that article, and they called Jessica, and we met, and they squashed that 1.3 million legal bill to 700,000, and they paid it. But I hear that Trillian spent 18 million rand fighting me. So actually, it was Steinscop. They were bled dry by Steinscop, and yeah, I mean, for me, my faith in God was just completely restored, because I would have to sell my house, and because how do you even start paying back a 1.3 million rand legal fee? Absolutely. And I went all around. I think I went to Freedom Under Law and other lawyers, and they said my case was not of national importance. And I was quite disappointed to see that it took a Frenchman in Paris to fly down. And we like to say African solutions for African problems. So, and till today, I'm like such a celebrated whistleblower. Everybody's like, can we support you, X, Y, Z? And PLAF is so jealous of me. And I said, no, guys, these are my people. They were there, but I do have other whistleblowers that I know who are also drowning in legal debt. And you cannot now decide to jump when now I'm in the headlines and I'm in the Financial Mail cover and I have a book out. And no, there are other people who are suffering in silence. Right. And so the hypocrisy of it all, it's quite astounding.
Yeah, and it really exposes the inadequacy of the legal framework in South Africa for protecting whistleblowers, as we've covered many times in Daily Maverick, that unlike in many other countries like Ghana, like the US, where whistleblowers are entitled to a portion of the funds that the government is able to recoup through their disclosures, here whistleblowers are simply left in the cold. And Mosilo, I think a lot of people find this really hard to believe when we're dealing with, a woman of your education, of your clear ability, talent, etc., experience in financial services, when we say corporate South Africa did not want anything to do with you, people say, well, that surely can't be true. I mean, you have demonstrated this ability, desire to do the right thing. Surely corporates must be banging down your door to employ you. And that's not the case, is it?
No, unfortunately, that's not the case for me, and it's not the case for Bianca Goodson. It's not the case for Themba Maseko. It's not the case for Ethel Williams. It's not the case for any other person in the last 10 years who has decided to fight corruption. Corporate SA, whether it's the banks, it's the government, it's corporates, they have this romantic statement, ethos. Integrity is our number one imperative, but in actual fact, they don't think that. I was unemployed for 24 months, and many reasons were given, whether they doubted my integrity, they said I was a politically exposed person, they said I was a political risk. They were afraid that if the government hears that they've hired me, they will take. They had contracts with the government, and they didn't want those contracts terminated. It took Rob Schutter, the CEO of MTN, in May 2018, when he saw an article in the Financial Mail that my darling brother Sigonati Manjanja wrote about the price of integrity. Mosilo took a bullet for us in South Africa, and we're paying her back with a bankruptcy. She has to sell her house. And Rob jumped, and he got me in on a contract. I was there for about 2 years. And after that, last year, after the gathering, I decided just to take a year off and write my book and heal. Because we haven't, what people don't see is the aftermath, a privileged life, and then going from being in the belly of state capture, then you think that integrity always wins, and the world is upside down. The corrupt are promoted, and the people who stand in the way of corruption are persecuted. And having 2 years of unemployment, and then having to meet the FBI and being harassed by the Hawks and the NPA. And so the emotional, psychological impact is completely devastating. So last year, I decided to just to heal. Of course, I have a trauma counselor, psychiatrist, I do yoga, I pray. And this year, I am now a politically exposed person. I'm the special advisor to Senzo Mgunu, the Minister of Public Administration. He just called me out of the blue, but I didn't send an email to anybody or my CV to anybody, because I'm still regarded as a leper. I'm still regarded as a undesirable, and all of us are. And people will say, maybe after your book, things will change. No, corporate SA has shown its hands. And I've had lunches with CEOs of banks, chairpeople of banks, and my CV is forwarded through, and there's just a deafening silence after that. And that has always been my experience till today. So I've just said, God, you are in control, and we'll live to see another day. But in terms of me, I really feel that I don't think I want to go back to corporate anymore. I found a bigger purpose in my life. I want to speak and encourage and embolden people to speak truth to power. I want to encourage, I wanted to join the speaking circuit, and then COVID happened. I want to at least maybe have a little bit of infrastructure finance, but I don't want that 8 to 5 job anymore. I think I've seen so much, and I've experienced so much, and I've learned so much, and there's so much that I can teach. People ask me, why did you write now? And I said, because I found the lesson of my experience, and that's to just to show how, if you recall last year, I said how a woman who's 1 meter 58 centimeters with childlike hands can beat a corrupt system. And I've won. I don't, even though nobody's in jail and we haven't recovered 1 cent. The fact that South Africa is the wiser, and hopefully Shamila Bito and her team are busy trying to ensure that dossiers are court ready. I feel that me going back to default mode of having a 9-to-5 job, doing Excel spreadsheets and PowerPoint presentations, and then I have to go and meet the FBI the other day, and then Zondo. So I just find that I'm not a different person anymore, but I think I can find somewhere a hybrid of me assisting in infrastructure finance, but also finding my own new purpose in the speaking circuit, because I think I have a powerful story.
Absolutely.
That the human spirit is strong and insurmountable, and we can accomplish so much more.
Absolutely. I think it's important also what you sort of hinted at there, and another whistleblower, Arthur Williams, has also said this, that when people hear the word whistleblowing, they think of it as a single event, but actually whistleblowing very rapidly becomes your full-time job, because you are called upon so many times to tell your story in front of various legislative bodies, various institutions, etc., Zondo Commission affidavits, lawyers, etc. It's not like you go and then move on with your life, is it?
No, you go. First of all, it's a turmoil of seeing it, probably trying to change the system. By the time you leave, you are disenfranchised. You have lost faith in humanity, because you thought that whistleblower line was going to solve everything, and you realize no, but the boss is in it, the chairperson is in it, the board is in it, and the shareholder is in it. Who am I to actually change anything? And then with us, I don't have to wait for the Zondo Commission's report to answer the question whether there was state capture or not. There was. I was there. I was in the room. When I was a suspect. Do you know that it was the FBI that was the first crime-fighting agency to contact me? They flew in from New York to interview me as somebody to assist them, because the minute you transact in dollars, it becomes that jurisdiction. So an American government thought me as an asset. My own government, that I blew the whistle on corruption, I was still a suspect. I was still intimidated and hounded down. And then when CR17 won in Nasrec, in January, all of a sudden the Hawks want me to help them fight the Guptas and Eric and Issa. And now the asset forfeiture unit are working. And I said, what happened? And they said, no, it was a different team. No, it was a different president. And the machinery now had collapsed. And I have seen how institutions are weaponized to ensure that those who say no to corruption, they are either thrown in jail, they're suspended, they're fired, their life is made a living nightmare. And then, of course, you have the unemployment. After that, I was a nervous wreck when I went back to work at MTN. Imagine having to have a conversation with your boss. This is who I am. I'm going to be late tomorrow. I'm going to the American embassy. I have a meeting with the FBI. Right. You can't even have that conversation with your colleagues. And then I started having panic attacks, and then I had to see a psychologist, and I was diagnosed with depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, insomnia. It's not, even today, the Zondo Commission wanted me to give them a supplementary affidavit because Mr. Gogo is saying he never met me. And I said, just read those emails in detail. How do I say, dear Mr. Gogo, thank you very much for meeting me yesterday. Right. As you requested, here's the additional stuff. And he says, I never took a meeting. Why do I have to supplement my affidavit when just read the details? Right. And it was in 2015. Did I have some agenda that I want I want to sort of incriminate him when I was signing those, typing those emails. So
and you also say in your book there comes a point where you also just have to step away a little bit for your own self-preservation. Mosilo, we've got 10 minutes and I'm going to take some of these questions. So many. Okay. I hope you will take time after this to read some of the really beautiful compliments coming your way. Please. You can have them printed out.
Life story to South Africa. Get yourself a copy.
Let's take some of these questions. So quick answers and let's get through a few. Herman Funk. Okay. Some of Mosilo's remarks make me question the NPA's willingness to really fight corruption. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. It's hollowed out. There are still elements that are not pro truth and democracy. Right now, I've signed several very simple criminal affidavits, like a simple thing of invoicing no work done, and then you get paid. Nothing's been done. So I think it's a combination of no skills. They're still captured and no political will.
Right. That is depressing. Solim Wang, how do you feel when you see Messrs. Coco, Singh, etc. lie at the Zondo Commission? Do you watch the Zondo Commission, by the way?
I do have to watch. Yes, it does anger me. And I was very disappointed that it was put to him to say, no, she says she met you. And he says, no. And I said, why don't you read him the emails? And then they say, no, why don't you give us a supplementary? And I said, read the emails. And I've done my part. So it does anger me that they can get away with so much. But I think the chairperson is clever enough to see, separate the wheat from the chaff.
Right. Grenville Smith, you spoke earlier of being headhunted to join Eric Woods at an enormous salary, big sign-on bonus. Did this not raise alarm bells at the time?
No, I had 16 years experience. And even being a Black female, I even started off at 110,000 Rand a month when my white counterparts in 2001 were earning 250. So I've always been a few 100,000 behind my white and counterparts. So it didn't ring alarm bells. And I was a CEO and I earned 2.3 million. I think that's above. And when you look at Transnet, I'm sure the CEO, they earned 6 million. So it didn't raise alarm bells. I think you also say in your book that it was also Eric Wood's strategy to price you out of the market. Yes, but also Ethel Williams was earning 11 million as a partner at Bain. So, yes. So corporate salaries are quite generous, but we don't have a life. We just work every day, all the time, and so I guess you have to. There's that risk and reward balance.
Here's one from Johan van Logrenberg. Of course, he himself is no stranger to this world through his experience at SARS, the so-called rogue unit. He is thanking you for your work, but also says, please elaborate on the effects on family and friends. In my own experience, these are the unseen victims also.
I am going to put on my electricity plug, so please bear with me 2 seconds.
Of course. Johan is also asking, please elaborate on the psychological trauma for future whistleblowers. This part is often understated or not explained. And I must say, I think Mosilo's book does an excellent job of elucidating that aspect. She writes in quite a lot of detail of the pretty much complete mental breakdown she faces after attempting to go back to work at MTN and finding herself still in the grip of PTSD and a whole other bunch of trauma-related afflictions. I'm going to get Mosilo to answer that, and then I think we will finish off with one question which pretty much everyone wants to know, but let's get to Johan's first, Mosilo. So that's impact on family and friends.
Johan, thank you so much for that question. I mean, it was Ivan Pillay and Yoli Biki that really rescued me. After I left Trillian, I was so isolated. I mean, I spent 2 years in bed crying. And that affects your relationship. My partner was 9 hours away from me. My former colleagues at Trillian had turned against me. Nobody could understand why I did it. You know, the minute my story came out in the Sunday Times, my friends like, no, but why did you do it? Why didn't you just walk away? So I felt isolated. Nobody could understand me. Little by little, I drew into my bedroom. As I said, I spent 2 years there. Just depression, anxiety, hopelessness. I lost my belief in humanity at some point. It was all just so soul destroying. I realized my friends didn't understand me anymore. The lack of support and understanding, the medical health issues I still have today. I still have my trauma counselor I see weekly, my psychiatrist. I still have insomnia. I still get anxiety from time to time. And it has been devastating. I broke up with my partner in October. It wasn't 100% that, but it did play a bit of that role. And of course, I think, Rebecca, if you saw that, my drinking, we start to drink to numb the pain. And I've seen everybody, like investigative journalists or whistleblowers, we all can, I remember my psychiatrist, I used to say, I can have a bottle a day just to numb the pain, because from 8 to 5, I hear my neighbors go to work and I'm at home doing absolutely nothing. And what do I do? And I said, no, I'm going to have wine for breakfast. And my psychiatrist said, that will wean away once we get you up and ready. So now we're okay on that. But it's devastating. I don't have children. I didn't have a husband. But I'm sure people have divorces. We have a WhatsApp group with other whistleblowers. They've had to take their kids from private school to public school. They've lost their medical aid. They can't have DSTV. They've had their houses repossessed, their cars repossessed. Rebecca, I don't want us to spoil us, but I've got miracles in my book that key people have actually come through for me. So I'm not in that bracket, but because of, I think, the media exposure that I had, that and the impact of my testimony had, that I really, really had pockets of miracles come through. But the majority of people were just cruel and insensitive, and it actually gives you, you sort of focus who's who in your circle, whether it's family or it is friends. So you really, really do a self-introspective, and my life is not the same, and the people in my life are not the same. And for you, I know the media was against you. So for me at least, I was portrayed as a hero. So it was, but I can't imagine now when imagine if I was in the Sunday Times being fraudster, steals from Trillian, So that is the peripherals that we don't focus on, but it's devastating on everybody. I mean, I remember when I had my nervous breakdown and my niece and nephew had to visit me. And after they left, I mean, I was skeleton. They broke down, and this is like a 5 and 7-year-old. So it's just devastating.
Mosilo, one last question. We've got about 30 seconds. But I think your answer is going to be quite succinct. The question everyone wants to know: would you do it again?
The answer to that is in the last page of my book. My trauma counselor, Richard Middleton, he says, Mosilo, if you knew your decision was going to cost you financially, emotionally, psychologically, would you do it again? And I say, Richard, read the book, you'll find out what the answer will be.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mosilo Mothepu. Her book is Uncaptured, the true account of the Nenegate Trillian Whistleblower. You can obtain it from the Daily Maverick store. You can get free delivery anywhere in South Africa, 10% off if you are a Maverick insider. Thank you all so much for joining us and for your wonderful comments and for your lovely, lovely feedback to Mosilo. I'm sure it means a great deal to her as well. And to Future Growth for sponsoring this webinar and making it possible. Thank you all, and see you all again soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.